Okay, so imagine this. A global superpower is bearing down on you, trying to completely erase your culture, your identity, everything you believe in. And the resistance? It's not some giant army. It's a single family, a priest and his 5 sons. This is the absolutely incredible true story of the Maccabees, a family that stared down an empire and ended up forging a nation.
And it all kicked off with this one defiant shout. These weren't just words. This was the spark that lit the whole fuse. It was a line in the sand, drawn by a village priest named Mattathias. He was basically saying, some things are not for sale, and some lines you just don't cross. This was the very beginning of a fight for religious freedom.
So what exactly were they up against? Well, it's this policy right here. Hellenization. The guy in charge with a massive Seleucid empire, King Antiochus IV, he basically wanted everyone in his kingdom to be Greek. And he wasn't asking nicely. He outlawed core Jewish traditions, things like circumcision and observing the Sabbath. And then he went and defiled the most sacred place, the temple in Jerusalem, by setting up an altar to Zeus inside. I mean, this wasn't just a political move, it was an all-out spiritual and cultural war. Now, you might think a conflict this huge would start in a palace or on some grand battlefield, but no. It all began in the tiny village of Modian, where that priest, Mattathias, was suddenly faced with an absolutely impossible choice. And this is where things just explode. Picture the scene. A government official shows up and demands a public sacrifice to a Greek god. Mattathias, who's the town's priest and a respected elder, he flat out refuses. But then another Jew steps forward, ready to do it. For Mattathias, that was the final straw, the ultimate betrayal. In a flash of just pure righteous fury, he kills them both, the guy complying and the official. After that, there was no turning back. He and his 5 sons grabbed what they could and fled into the wilderness. The rebellion had officially begun. So hiding out in the rugged Judean hills, Mattathias and his sons weren't just, laying low. They were actively fighting back. They started a full-on guerrilla war, a campaign to preserve their culture. They'd raid villages to tear down pagan altars, secretly perform circumcisions for newborn goys, and rally anyone who would listen. They even made a critical ruling, a real game-changer, that it was okay to fight on the Sabbath if you were defending your life. This wasn't just a rebellion anymore, it was a movement to save an entire way of life. As Mattathias was dying, he passed the leadership on to his 3rd son, who turned out to be a military genius. His name was Judas, but history would come to know him by his nickname, Maccabeus, the Hammer.
And wow, did Judas live up to that name, the Hammer. He led this small band of rebels against the professional armies of a superpower, and he kept winning. Again and again. Using these brilliant tactics and his knowledge of the terrain, he pulled off these impossible victories at places like Beth Horon and Ms. He was routing forces many times their size and just building this incredible momentum that would take them all the way to the gates of Jerusalem itself.
And this all leads to the big one. The moment Judas and his fighters finally retake Jerusalem. They march into the desecrated temple, they tear down the pagan altars, build a new one, and they relight the sacred menorah. The 8-day celebration they held to rededicate the temple, well, that's the origin of Hanukkah, the Festival of Lights, which is still celebrated today as this powerful symbol of light overcoming darkness. But hold on, the story doesn't end with Judas's amazing victory. The great warrior eventually fell in battle, and leadership passed to his remaining brothers. And this is where the fight really evolved. It went from a war for religious freedom to a full-blown campaign for political independence. You can really see the strategy shift right here, where Judas, the Hammer, was all about religious freedom, one with the sword and guerrilla warfare. His brothers Jonathan and Simon, they were playing a totally different game. They were aiming for something bigger, a completely independent Jewish state. And their weapons of choice? Diplomacy, political maneuvering, and taking advantage of the civil war brewing inside the enemy's empire.
Let's talk about Jonathan, the youngest brother. After Judas died, he was the one who picked up the pieces, and he was a master statesman. He was so clever. He played these rival claimants to the Seleucid throne against each other, and got himself appointed high priest, which was a position of immense religious and political power. He basically turned the rebellion into a recognized political force, before he, too, was tragically betrayed and killed.
All this political maneuvering and fighting brings us to this one pivotal year. After decades of struggle, the last surviving son of Mattathias, Simon, finally achieved the ultimate goal. In 142 BC, the Seleucid Empire, torn apart by its own infighting, officially recognized Judea's full political independence. They had done it.
Simon was the nation builder of the family. He captured the Acra, this enemy fortress that had been looming over Jerusalem for years. He started minting Jewish coins, a huge symbol of sovereignty. And maybe most importantly, he established the Hasmonean dynasty, named for an ancestor, which secured his family's rule for generations. The rebellion had officially become a kingdom. But in what became a tragic family pattern, he also met a violent end, assassinated by his own son-in-law.
So you have to ask yourself, how on earth did this one family pull this off, going from a single defiant priest in a small village to the founders of an entire dynasty? It's just incredible. And here they are, the 5 sons. You had Judas, the brilliant general, Jonathan, the master diplomat, Simon, the nation builder, and let's not forget their other brothers, Eleazar, who died heroically charging a war elephant in battle, and Jonathan, who was one of the first casualties of the war. Each one played a crucial part. It really, truly was a family affair.
And you know, the legacy didn't even die with them. Simon's son, John Hyrcanus, he took the independent kingdom his father built and expanded it, conquering surrounding lands and turning Judea into a real regional power. The dynasty that Mattathias had sparked in the hills of Medine was now an empire in its own right.
So this leaves us with a pretty big question. The story of the Maccabees happened over 2,000 years ago, but its themes are just timeless. We're talking about a family that refused to let their identity be wiped out, a people who fought for their freedom against impossible odds. It really makes you think, what does their incredible story of survival and freedom mean for us today?